All praises and glory to Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai, Ba'asham Ha Rakakudash. Double honors to our apostle elders which rule great millstone well, and shalom to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel. May you endure into the end. Shalom wa abababal. Alright, so Biden issued an executive order authorizing military leaders, including Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, to mobilize select reserve forces in an effort to augment Operation Atlantic Resolve, which began in 2014 in response to Russian actions in Ukraine, which is from Newsweek.com. Alright, which this is a step towards the draft. There will be a draft. Okay, they're going to draft men, women, and even children, which is historical, right? They've done it before. Like in World War II, the youngest U.S. soldier was that was shot was a 12-year-old. All right, so even young men and young women could be possibly drafted into World War III. All right, which that's what this is going to be, and where it's going to take place is the Middle East. All right, and that's something I heard when I was watching these military, putting their perspective on it. They said that these reserves are going to be spread out throughout Europe, and they could end up even in Africa or other places, wherever they are needed. All right, but if there's a conflict that is requiring them to be as fighters in any land, they said, that they're there to be used in the disposal of, men of war. So this is turning, more violent because America is going to suffer great violence. And that's going to be why your men are drafted into the war. All right? Because you're going to have to suffer here in Babylon the Great. Okay? While all your men go off to war. It tells you in 2 Esdras 16, verse 33, the virgins shall mourn having no bridegrooms, the women shall mourn having no husbands, their daughters shall mourn having no helpers. In the wars shall their bridegrooms, their husbands, be destroyed, and their husbands shall perish of famine, which I don't doubt they're going to, leave some of these soldiers starving, because in a time of war, sometimes resources ain't able to get to your soldiers, so then they just end up starving or cannibalizing or eating animals and getting sick and dying. All right, but it says wars because even in America, you're going to have a war. The Lord said he's going to gather these nations. All right, and that's why we always say, in the scripture, it tells you that these women are going to be raped. All right, in Babylon. And that's why, because you're not going to have no men to protect you. The men are going to be sent off to war to die by fire in the valley of Jehoshaphat when Yahushua returns. All right, and the ones that are in America, they're going to burn from nuclear destruction. Zechariah 14, verse 1, behold, the day of Yahweh cometh. So this is judgment time, all right? And thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, which these UN soldiers that they're going to send this way, they're going to actually go into your house and loot your goods. For I will gather all nations, the UN, against Jerusalem, the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American Indian, to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished. So the women are going to be raped because they're going to be left alone, just like it says in 2 Esdras 16, which we just read. But once again, in verse 33, the virgins shall mourn having no bridegrooms, the women shall mourn having no husbands, Their daughters shall mourn, having no helpers in the wars. There's going to be wars here in America. There's going to be war in the land of Israel, in the valley of Jehoshaphat. All right, which is going to be called World War III. All right, the war that ends all wars. It says, in the wars shall their bridegrooms be destroyed, and their husbands shall perish of famine. Hear now these things, and understand them, ye servants of the Lord. And that's what I understand when I see these things, like Biden calls up 3,000 reserve troops to augment U.S. forces in Europe. All right, which I heard a brother, I don't know if he's an elder or not, I don't know the brother personally, but he was a brother of Great Millstone, and he was out. He left the military. He was there, but then he served his time, and then he got out. But he was explaining that this is the time. This is what the draft looks like. This is what a draft looks like, right? They're calling up their reservists. What's after that? It's the draft. All right. So it says President Biden authorizes call up of 3,000 reserve troops in support of Operation Atlantic Resolve, which they said you're pretty much going to be against the Russians, right? Because all those NATO nations, which America is a NATO military, is going to go against Russia, or is already going against Russia. So eventually Russia is going to nuke America, and he's going to use its allies to do so. All right? So they're going to turn their back on America. See, it says right here, Biden's order grants Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin permission to call up reserve units and send them into Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe, that's next to Russia. That's where Ukraine is. That's where the conflict is. So even though they're saying they're not going to be sent to battle, they are going to be sent to battle. All these soldiers of NATO are going to be gathered eventually in the valley of Jehoshaphat, all right? And they're going to be destroyed there. All right, by Yahushua. Yahushua is going to shoot a blast of fire upon them from a so-called UFO. All right, it says, and send them into Eastern European countries as the war in Ukraine countries per military times. Although Ukraine has asked to join NATO, the U.S. along with other NATO members have said it wouldn't happen immediately. And that's what Esau does. He does things gradually. All right. So we're about to go into a time where they're going to draft people, especially Jake, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, into their war. All right. And they're going to make it mandatory that you have an implantable microchip. If you agree and take this device and be in their war, you're going to be destroyed. All right. It tells you here that in 2 Esdras 13, it says, verse 5, and after this I beheld, and lo, there was gathered together a multitude of men out of number from the four winds of heaven to subdue the man that came out of the sea, which is Yahushua. And all those men that you can't number are the men from all the different countries being gathered, all right, under the so-called white man, Esau, Edom, to fight Yahushua and his angels, to subdue the man that came out of the sea. The sea is the heavens, and the man being Yahushua, and he's coming on a so-called UFO, and the armies of heaven are going to follow him. But I beheld, and lo, he had graved himself a great mountain and flew up upon it. So this chariot is like looking at a mountain range in the air. You can't see one end from the other. But I would have seen the region or place where out the hill was graven, and I could not. So he didn't know where it came from, nor where it ended. And after this I beheld, and lo, all they which were gathered together, which you're going to have Jake gathered in these armies to subdue him, were sore afraid, and yet there's fight, right? So they're going to be afraid at what they see, and then they're going to still have it in them to fight, because the Lord, he wants to kill them. And lo, as he saw the violence of the multitude that came, he neither lifted up his hand, so he didn't deflect it with his arm, nor held sword, nor any instrument of war, but only I saw that he sent out of his mouth as it had been a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast sparks and tempests, which is that judgment. You're going to have nuclear destruction in America. You're going to have chariot fire, the blast of fire. You're going to have the Leviathan breathing fire. You're going to have the elect breathing fire on the enemy. All right? Let's go back to Zechariah 14. It says, once again in verse 2, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, right? So they're going to bring these nations, these other nations, into active duty as well, and unleash them on the people in the streets of America. And the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, meaning looted and destroyed, and the women, which are going to be left alone, ravished. And half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Which you're going to have some people put in FEMA camps, and some people they're going to leave scavenging for food and shit like that. Then shall Yahweh go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle, which they're going to find themselves fighting against Yahweh. It says, verse 12, and this shall be the plague wherewith Yahweh will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. And this is the judgment of them that go to war against us in Babylon, in the land of America. There's going to be a nuclear destruction after they make the implantable microchip mandatory for buying and selling. America is going to be turned into a lake of fire at the return of Yahushai. And then I just read how Israel is going to be touched with fire when Yahushai returns as well. All right? Spirit had me look for something else, but it's not here that I was thinking was here. But with that, all praises and glory to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai B'Shem HaBakakodash. Double honors to our apostle elders, which rule great millstone well, and shalom to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel. May you endure into the end. Shalom, blah, blah, blah.